Just to follow up on that, one of the plans to deal with the Turnpike's financial situation is the governor's plan that he recently announced. Some are calling it a bailout, but essentially to use the state's bond rating, very good bond rating, to guarantee whatever money needs to be borrowed to get the Turnpike out of trouble. What do you think of that proposal?
I think it's risky. Unless there's strong fiscal management from the moment we guarantee their debt, we put ourselves at risk of damaging our great bond rating. Because if we guarantee the debt at the Turnpike and problems continue to happen, that then impacts our bond rating, which then impacts our ability to do anything else when it comes to bonding. So I think it's a well-intentioned. The governor has to come up with a solution, and this is a tough issue, and there's no easy solution to fixing this problem. But I would be concerned that if we don't do that with some hitch of financial management oversight, that we risk really hurting our bond rating in the end. A year or two ago, people thought that the Central Artery project was out of whack, and we all knew that. But in general, people thought the Turnpike was pretty well run because it was some of the best red roads. No one knew that. No one had accounted for the interest in the cost of the project and all these other factors that have now made the thing almost bankrupt. So that concerns me. I would have thought, well, geez, maybe they know what they're doing. Now that concerns me. If there's some oversight component put in there, then I'd be a lot more comfortable with it. But you're playing with our future. And this is what I mean by the decisions we make in the next 10 years will impact the next century. You mess with the bond rating now, not only is it going to impact us in 10 years, but in 20 and 30 and 40 years. And our ability to do anything is based in large measure on that bond rating. And, cities have parties when their bond rating goes up. We really can't put ourselves at risk of reducing our bond rating.
We've got a few minutes left. Let's talk about education a little bit.
Sure.
What do you think of the governor's education proposal that would move the authority to negotiate teacher contracts from the local community to the state? I mean, really, that's not the only part of his proposal, but he had a very wide-ranging proposal, and he talked about giving the state that authority. What do you think of that option?
I think it's well-intentioned, but it's another opportunity where the state's taking away from. They're going to then negotiate a contract and then give the contract back to the towns with the bill. The towns and the communities need to have an opportunity to negotiate with. They know best, and the teachers in their community know best what they need. And I think I get the idea that by doing that, they realize some cost savings, perhaps. But until the state fulfills its other obligations to the towns, I'm not really in the mood to give them another opportunity to mandate something back down to the towns.
Another proposal he's talked about are merit pay, but not for high-achieving teachers, but merit pay for teachers in a high-achieving school. Treating teachers as a group. Do you support merit pay for teachers, or do you support the governor's proposal, or is merit pay not a good idea to start with?
I think something has to be done to encourage. First of all, my sister's a public school teacher, and I have the most. I grew up. Not only did I go to public school, but I grew up in a public school because it was my mother. She was the secretary in the school in Lancaster, and still is. I have enormous respect for public school teachers, and they are amazing people, and they give 110% of their day to the work that they do, and they need to be rewarded more. Teachers should be making an awful lot more than they are, considering what they're asked to produce is our future. They're asked to educate the next generation of our leaders and our decision makers and our businessmen and women, and so I think they need to be treated with a lot more respect than they are in large measure. I think merit pay has a lot of advantages. I'm not wild about the competition that goes on between teachers in a given school, which is why I think the governor's talking about the whole school. I think that's probably a more realistic approach. And, in the schools that I've been intimately involved in, teachers teach as a community. They really don't. They do feel that if they all succeed, if one of them succeeds, they all succeed, and they all work well together. So I think that's got a lot of merit. Not to use the word merit too many times, but I think the other pitting teacher against teacher is a little bit more difficult. But anything we can do to give teachers and students the resources they need. My sister pays close to $1,000 a year out of her own pocket to outfit her classroom with stuff. Out of her own pocket. All the bookcases and everything, half of them are mine in her classroom because I've moved from one place to another or something. And it's no fault of the school system. They don't have the money, and the teachers want those children to have the best education they can, so they create these wonderful, warm, inviting environments. But they do it all on their own dime. And the fact that we have people willing to do that, we should celebrate every day. But we shouldn't be asking people to take a job that doesn't pay, and then asking them to do more out of their own pocket. I'm just grateful we have people willing to do it, but that shouldn't be a decision that they have to make.
I guess one of the questions when you talk about merit pay for teachers is how are you going to determine what makes a meritorious teacher? Of course, one of the things that immediately comes to mind is the MCAS. Mm-hmm. Look at the MCAS generally. Do you support the MCAS as a graduation requirement?
I support it as a standard, not as the sole requirement. I think it's, although, before I worked for Attorney General Riley, he successfully argued that it should be a graduation requirement for the Supreme Judicial Court. So far be it for me to say the SJC was wrong, but I support it as a standard. I think it's important that we have that standard, but I think it can't be the sole factor. There need to be other factors, because there are just some kids who don't take tests well, and there are other, you need to give those kids an opportunity. And the remediation. I mean, there needs to be more money spent to help these kids who aren't passing it each time, because they get several chances to pass it. More money needs to go into those. Every time the money gets cut, you throw a little bit of extra money in, but it doesn't really get down to the kids, into the communities, and that's a real problem. And if we're going to have this requirement, we need to give these kids the resources to help them help themselves. They're not. It's what I was saying earlier. They're not looking for a handout. They just need a little bit of help. And if we're asking them to take these tests, we should not just. First of all, we should never teach to the test, but when preparing for the test, and if they've had difficulty passing in the past, there should be tutorial programs and remedial programs, as there are, but they should be fully funded, and people should get a chance to avail themselves of it so the kids can have a real opportunity. Because getting a high school diploma and then going on to college or going on to a trade or whatever gives people an opportunity to move into a successful part in the economy, and that's what's important.
Sorry, I'm smiling because the bubbler just came on in the background. It's probably creating quite a buzz.
It's the loudest bubbler in
Sterling, anyway.
Yeah.
When you talk about MCAS and talk about good students, one of the criticisms that folks in a community like Sterling have about charter schools is that essentially Sterling is paying to send its best students out of the district. What is your position on charter schools as they stand and on the possible expansion or capping of charter schools?
I think charter schools have a place. I really don't believe that the funding should be stuck with the towns. That's a big concern I have. That the state has created these charter schools and then pilot programs and all these things, and then they say to the town, someone opens a charter school in Sterling and then hands the bill to the Board of Selectmen and they have to pay it. I don't think that's fair to the voters of Sterling or the taxpayers of Sterling. I think they've been a good experiment. They've worked in large measure. There have been some. In the Attorney General's office, we had to shut one down in Boston. That was a difficult process. But I think they can be good for certain students need different types of learning environments. And John Adams, rightly so, wrote into our Constitution for the first time in history a right to education. And I think we need to do as a government, we have an obligation to find out whatever that means for whatever student and find a way to provide that child with that education. But we shouldn't be burdening the cities or towns with that cost if it's a state-mandated program that allows for those things to happen. I think they should still happen, but I don't think that the cost should be borne by the city or town.